As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. How are you guys? You doing good?
Good.
Yeah.
Buck.
Yeah.
Mr. Co-host, what's the question of the episode? We're just going to dive right in.
Well, I'm glad you asked, because the question of the day is, how does my inner critic impact me as a dad?
Is that not the most bizarre question? Like, is this the question you probably didn't see coming on the episodes as we talk about?
It's a question I ask every hour.
It is.
No.
I like that. Okay.
It's not.
So it is not an obvious question, but what about you guys? Your inner critic. Like, let's just start with that. Talk about your inner critic for a little bit. Like, nice guy, mean.
No, my inner critic is not nice to me. I would say, for the most part, I'm probably my own worst critic. I'm the one that picks on myself the most. I'm the one that says, hey, can you do this? Are you smart enough? Do you have the ability? I question it a lot, actually. And I think, sometimes it's finding ways to kind of pull myself out of it and encourage myself. But I find that, a lot of times, even especially at work, I think is performance driven. It's where I question a lot of my inner ability and what I've been gifted in.
What about as a dad?
Well, hold on. And by the way, people, that if you're listening to us now, that is Jason Hood. Hi, Jason.
Hey, how you doing, Buck?
Jason, tell us who you are, what you do.
Yeah, I'm the All Pro Dad chapter national director. So I oversee the chapter program for All Pro Dad.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good job, Buck. See,
thank you. That's
the
co-host of the year.
I like that. I like that.
And this is BJ Foster. BJ Foster is a man of many words.
Thank you.
Because he's a writer for All Pro Dad.
I like that. Buck,
and I'm a video audio producer.
And my name's Ted.
For All Pro Dad.
Yeah.
And you're just Ted.
I'm just Ted. I'm just Ted. So, Jason, how does that impact you as a dad? What does the inner critic say to you as you're trying to be a good dad?
Well, I mean, I think about my relationship with my dad has been, off and on my whole life. And so for me, I think about the dad I want to be, and am I living up to that? And most of the time I tell myself, you're not. You're not living up to that. You're not spending enough time with your son. You work too hard. You when you're tired, you kind of zone out. And those things are true sometimes. But a lot of times I find myself, even in the midst of spending a lot of time with my kids, it's like, are they going to have a good childhood? Are they going to look back at our time together and 10 years, 15 years from now, are we still going to have a really good relationship? And I think I almost try to scare myself into doing more of just saying, hey, you're not doing enough as a dad. Is your son going to love you in 20 years? Is your daughter going to love you in 20 years? And I think for me, it's harder actually with my son than it is with my daughter. I have this close, affectionate relationship with my daughter, whereas with my son, I psych myself up as like, he's got to be a man. He's going to, raising him is different because he's going to have to be a man in this world versus, she's going to have to be a daughter in this world. So I think about it differently.
BJ, you and I have talked about this beforehand, but talk a little bit about your inner critic. Like, how does that impact you personally, but then as a dad?
My inner critic was always very much like, you're on the outside looking in. Like, they got it all together. They know what to do, and you don't. You're lost. You're just kind of, it was sort of this, and it wasn't really a voice. It was just like this feeling of, you're an 11 or 12-year-old in an adult world. And when they find that out,
they're going to string you up.
Yeah, you're going to be made fun of,
publicly humiliated. Yeah.
Publicly humiliated.
So how does that impact you as a dad?
As a dad, I think, it's like, okay, all the other dads they're able to effectively provide for their kids. They're able to model what it's like to be an adult. Like, I've had these things go on. Like I found out last night renting a car, my car insurance expired. I'm like, oh, great. I don't have car insurance. How did that happen? Here it is again.
I'm not an adult.
I'm not an adult. I'm not an adult. It's like, where did I go wrong with it? Like, there are all these little things that I sort of feel like other dads are are men, and yet I'm 12 years old, and I've done a lot of work on it, and it's not as loud anymore. I don't believe. Maybe it's as loud, and I don't believe it as much anymore. I'm like, okay, all dads have their things. All men have.
If it makes you feel any better, I just found out that the car I'm selling has a title that's in Illinois, a state I haven't lived in 7 years. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all do these they feel like boy moves, right?
Yeah.
Buck, what about you?
I think my inner critic always is kind of questioning, like how are my boys going to grow up?
Yeah.
Like what are they going to be like when they're adults? Because I feel like that's one of my main jobs as a dad. Is I'm raising these human beings to be contributing adults to society,
right?
In a certain way, and am I doing that well? Am I a contributing adult to society for them to be an example to look up to? And so I think my inner critic is always kind of like heightened to, like how are they going to act, in public? How are they going to act when they get older? I see things in them now that I see in myself that I don't like, and I feel like we do that a lot.
Yeah.
We're more heightened to the things that we do in other people, and we don't like to see it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's so
and
true.
so, and I'm like, I kind of see that sometimes in my boys, and I'm like, oh, I gotta fix that, but I won't fix it in myself.
Yeah. Do you push harder into those moments? Because that's what I do. Like for sure,
Yeah,
I see
think
something
so.
that I don't like in them, and I'm like, oh, I do that. I need to fix that.
Yeah.
And it terrifies me that I'm not going to be able to fix
But
it.
I don't fix it in myself.
Right,
Like
exactly,
I don't
yeah.
prioritize to fix it in myself.
Yeah.
I prioritize to tell them like, hey, don't do that kind of thing. But then I'm sure they're looking at me going like, yeah, but
bro.
you just
Yeah,
did that
you
5 minutes ago, guy. It's like
Well,
do what I say, not what I do kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and it heightens, right? It's a bigger trigger. So the reason I wanted to bring this up with you guys is I was doing some research for a book on how our thoughts impact us relationally. And one of the things that kind of surprised me, I kept going to all the, how's this affecting your relationship dynamic, is how important it is what we think about ourselves and how that impacts our relationship.
Yeah.
And, I've always struggle with anxiety, and my wife sometimes she'll say, "How you doing?" And a few years later, a few years back, I would say, "It's tough to be in here," and she knew exactly what I was talking about. And then one day, I just named the voice.
I would have been like,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
right.
Like I'm in here.
She knows me well enough when I said, "It's tough to be in here." She knows that struggle. And so I started naming. I named him, actually, Fred in my head. And for those who can't see us, Fred in my bald head. But I started realizing just inner critic, and mine is a jerk and violently so at times. And incessant about it. And so I started doing the research on this. And then when I wrote the chapter on this thing, I kept going back to my wife and went, "Oh, this is too personal. Like, I'm the only one that struggles with this. This is way too personal. Once it goes out in print, it's out there, and people are going to know that how crazy I am with this." You're talking about Fred in your head? That sounds a little psychotic.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? It was in the second chapter, and I thought, they're going to toss it right after this. And she kept going, "Everybody's got this.
Yeah.
Everybody's got this. Everybody's got this." And then when I started talking about it to different groups, everybody's got this, and to different degrees. But I think, when you think of just us sitting at the table, I don't think people thought that about me. Like, I don't think that people think about you guys. They're not thinking that you don't measure up. They're not thinking, because mine is this anxiety about having anxiety.
Yeah.
You're anxious. You're going to be anxious all the time. It's going to because I've had panic attacks before, and it's always like this little voice going, "And you're going to have another, and you're going to have another." And so I sit in this anxiety of that. And then so my kids are around a more anxious dad. And then when I see those things, Jason, you pointed out so perfectly, when you see those things in your kid that you haven't integrated or you haven't accepted about yourself, it just triggers.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't, it just triggers. And so in the research, I thought, okay, great. We all get the problem. right? I think most people listening go, "Oh, I have that. Thought I was the only one." What's the solution to this thing? So I did a lot of digging, and I landed on this exercise. It's been around for 30 plus years. It has this ridiculous success rate, and it's ridiculously simple. And I started doing it, and it made a huge difference. And I felt two things. One, I was frustrated that nobody's talking about this. But then I was just so thankful, and it's so simple. In fact, what I want to do right now is I want to walk you through it. You're going to think it's way too simple to matter, okay? But what I want to do, people listening, they're going to be thinking the same thing too. First of all, you name your inner critic. I call mine Fred. I'm sure he's available for franchising. He is a high capacity leader. So if you want to name yours Fred, and the reason you give him a name is it separates those thoughts from you. When you start thinking about someone else saying this, then you question, is this even true? Is this a true statement? Is this a kind statement? First, we got to give him a name. So again, you can call him Fred. Give him a name. Buck.
And I want to preface this with, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings that are named this name.
You know what?
BJ.
Yeah, BJ. Yeah,
BJ Foster. That's what I'm naming.
BJ.
Kyle. Yeah.
Kyle. Okay.
Kyle.
All right. All the
Kyle.
Kyle. All right.
Kyle.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's always a Kyle.
Come on, Kyle.
Kyle always.
Sorry to all the Kyles.
All right.
Sure, there's
BJ, what
good
about
ones.
you?
Tyler.
Tyler.
In fact, when I was kind of young, a kid named Tyler kind of bullied me, so it's kind of perfect.
Perfect.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm going with Jerry.
Jerry.
Ooh.
Yeah. Jerry's a jerk.
Jerry's a jerk.
Jerry the jerk.
I had other names flowing around in my head, but I just, they're too personal. So I think I'll go with something. I wanted it to be real, close to Jason because it's still me in my head speaking it, but it helped me when I started thinking about this. I read this and I was like, oh, this is a good idea. So we're going with Jerry.
Oh, maybe I should go with Chuck.
Okay.
Chuck and Buck.
I like that.
That's Chuck talking.
Okay.
All right, I'm going with Chuck.
Okay, so you got a name. Everybody's got a name. All right. Everybody listening, get your name. Okay. The second thing that you do is you write down, and you've got to write it down. And I type it down, but there's something that happens instead of just thinking about, you'll write down, what are those messages that he's saying to you? What is some of the messages that he was saying to you? Let's just take one, for example. What is something, Jason, that he's said to you?
For me, it's two things that are kind of the standout in my head is one, you're not smart enough, you're not intelligent enough. And the other one is you're not talented enough. You're just an average run of the mill. There's nothing special about you. So you're not smart and you're not talented. So don't expect yourself to be that, and don't expect to do anything great.
He is a jerk, right?
Yeah, Jerry's a jerk, man.
Yeah.
But you're not alone in that, right?
Right.
We hear that, and people that know you go, "That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be here if those things were true, right?" I'm sure your wife and your kids.
Oh yeah,
right.
My wife is so unbelievably she encourages me so much, and it's hard for me to believe it. It really is.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe. It's hard to accept the praise and just just sit in it for a minute. It feels good in the moment, but it's fleeting.
So basically, your Fred is saying, average. You're never going to do anything great. You're not smart enough.
Yeah.
All those things. And what your wife's saying,
Right.
Not so much.
Right.
This is, what'd you say his name was? I forgot.
Jerry the jerk.
What Jerry the jerk is saying it's true, right? And that's the problem because we live what he's saying is true.
A friend of mine worked at, he'd work at a camp and he was entertainment, and one of his characters was slightly better than average man. It was he had a B- on his chest. It's kind of like that. It's like,
Yeah,
and he would have his hands and, he'd be like, I take things from here to here. And it was like, a millimeter up. It's kind of like that.
It's funny.
Mine would be, you're a fraud and people are going to figure it out. And so, but it's either that or it's, you don't really have what it takes, and they're going to find it out. And anytime that something happens that validates that voice, I can almost see him going, "Yeah,
Told you so."
I told you
Yep.
that they're going to figure it out." Or even just kind of wink, "They're figuring it out."
You're a fraud.
You're a fraud.
It just reminds me of that sound on social media of like, how are they going to know? How are
Nobody's
they
gonna
going to
know.
Nobody's going to know.
Nobody's gonna know. Buck,
They're
what
gonna
about
know.
you?
They're going to know.
Yeah, they already know.
Yeah. I think to be, I don't know, succinct with what Chuck in my head is saying is maybe even just a broad, like you're not a good dad. You know, you can be a good. Well, and that's the thing is that like, I don't know. It's a lot because it's in some moments. Do I need to be a good dad or am I trying to just be like a good friend? And then in some other cases, am I being too hard of a dad and I'm not being fun enough?
Yeah.
You know, or ease up a little, like ease up, man. You know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard to kind of button that down.
Yeah.
Chuck talks a lot.
I deal with that too, though. Thinking of, like I said before, thinking about 10, 15 years down the road is like, are we still going to have a stronger relationship? Is he going to, you know, I think back, is he going to, you know, be one of those kids to say, you know, my dad always said, and I want to be that kind of dad. My dad always taught me this.
Yeah.
So it's my dad always taught me filter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like for what you're saying, like it's putting questions in your head.
Yeah.
It's the constant questions. It's condemnation, but then it's question. Hey, wonder how this is going to go.
Right.
How are they going to turn out? Are you going to be one of those dads? Because I don't know.
And it's so far away, and you can't do anything. Like,
Right.
how do you like manage it in the middle?
Yeah.
Right. It's like,
How old are your kids?
7 and 12.
So you're going. So
I'm in it right now. Like,
yeah. Yeah, so you've got to wait 6 more years to know.
Right.
At least. And they're still crazy at 18, so
You're
you won't
right.
even know.
I was about to
then.
say, yeah.
Yeah, they won't even know it. So
In about 20 years, your kids will be in therapy.
Right, exactly.
The therapist will
My
be like,
dad
"How was
always
your
taught
dad?"
me this.
He was okay.
Oh, he
No,
always
that's
said
not
this.
the dad. I didn't want you to say that. But,
So we can't do this right now. And people are driving, running, doing whatever they're doing right now and listen to the podcast. You can't. You got to promise me you're going to come back and do this. But you write their name, you write down what they're saying, and then you categorize it. Because Fred has a ton of side hustles. And by listing out these side hustles beside it, you start to see what his brand is for you. For instance, there's fortune teller. You know, it's always going, this is not going to go well for you. Your kids are not going to turn out okay. They're going to find out. They're going to fire me. You know what? I can tell in the future they're not going to know, was my dad, I don't know which direction to go. You know, because sometimes he was too hard and sometimes it wasn't enough. Yeah. And so he starts to tilt the future. And, you know, I'm a Christian. So for me, I only think God can tell the future. So I think, nobody can tell the future. So when your Fred's telling your future, you're going, that's not true. Or a mind reader, I know what they were really thinking. Somebody could just be having a bad day and I go, I know what they were really thinking. And I'm just going to go through these pretty fast. But interpreter, they interpret the situation. The shamer, I can't believe you did that. And then the labeler. This is where Fred gets really verbal and reveals himself. Because you'll hear people say, I'm so stupid, or I'm so dumb, or I'm such a bozo, or I'm such an idiot. That's when he gets really, really loud. Blamer, that's when it's focused outward. I can't believe they did this to me. The convincer, go ahead and do that thing you shouldn't do. Go ahead. What difference does it make? What difference? And the second you do and it's over, it's like, I can't believe you did that. You're unforgivable. Right. Always never were. This is, and I made up never were. Spell check hates it, but you always are going to be a bozo. You're always not going to measure up. You're never going to this. You're always going to be a fraud. You're never going to understand what you're doing. As a dad. And so you start to label it. For me with my kids, it's like, I told myself one day, I thought, or Fred told me, your kids are going to look back and go, I never knew what mood he was going to be in, which there may be some truth to that. He was either super fun or he was frustrated. Like that's my thing of going, they don't know who's walking in. And so that's been my thing. They don't know. You're going to leave them unsteady. They're going to end their world not knowing. They're not going to be sure enough.
Can I say something to that
Please.
real quick? So I think Chuck loves to throw my kids' words back at me. And my kids right now, my boys are very good, like champs at this, and it's very scary. At saying things like, oh, Dad, you're always going to work, or like you're never here, and I'm like, guys, we just spent the past 5 hours like doing,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but like I have to leave to go to something, or like I play drums at church time where they're home all day and stuff, and like, you know, I'm coming in from work and we're getting dinner real quick, and then I've got to go out to band practice, you know, on Wednesday. But as I'm leaving the house, like, Dad, you always have to go somewhere, and I'm like,
Always.
Chuck is like writing this down, like,
Yeah.
see, I told you, you know. But like,
Well,
to encourage, I guess I would say, you know, to the dads, I can guarantee that probably most every dad listening right now, their kid has told them that, and it's. You know, it's pretty baseless, but it's the kid trying to manipulate you in that moment because they want you to stay there. But that's honestly, that's a kid being a kid.
Yeah.
Well,
you know?
it's childish words. Justin Fred's often childish. Like, and kids do use the words always
but
and never.
It does grind.
Oh, yeah,
you know?
for sure.
That's the thing. And in that moment, you don't go, you hear a child go, you always at work.
Yeah.
You know, perception's reality, says Fred. Perception's reality.
Am I?
Yeah. And so they use that language, and so we believe them. Oftentimes, it's so easy to live like Fred tells us the truth. That he has and he has our best interest in heart. So you name him, you write the thoughts down, that you list the side hustle that he's using, and then you talk back to him.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways to do this. As a Christian, I'd like to think, what would God be saying to me right now? What would God be saying? What would, Abba Father be saying back to me on this? Because when you listen, you start to write those thoughts down. You can very, very quickly go, he wouldn't say that. He wouldn't say this.
Right.
He wouldn't say this. He wouldn't say this. And he can't say this because he doesn't know the future. And he can't say this because he can't read minds. And all of a sudden, this list starts to dissolve in me anyway. And for us too, for some people, you could say, hey, just talk back to it like you would talk to a friend. Like if a friend brought this to you, because let's say, for instance, BJ, says, I'm a fraud. Everybody that knows BJ, his kids, his coworkers, his wife goes, that is not true. What would a friend say back to you? Jason, the same for you. Buck, the same for you. I'm still accepting the same for myself, but just say, so I'll ask you guys, what would a friend say back to you to those things?
Yeah, like immediately, I want to fight Fred, Chuck, and Jerry. Like, I don't like Fred, Chuck, and Jerry.
We're about to have a street fight.
Yeah, I'm like, who do Fred, Chuck, and Jerry think they are? Is immediately what I think. So I think a friend would stand up a friend would say, this is not cool. Don't ever accept that. I kind of hear, like, my parents were big on, like, stand up and fight. Do not let somebody say, like, particularly my mom would be like, you do not let anyone talk to you. She's kind of a fighter. But she would be like, you don't let anyone talk to you that way. You stand up for yourself. And so I kind of realized one day, if somebody else was saying this to a friend of mine, I'd be mad. I'd be really mad. And I would make sure that they knew that it wasn't true.
That's great. I know you do get defensive for your buddy. Like you guys are saying that you're going, and I have a high need to fight them too. Like to fight them people. Like that's when I'm going, no, because it robs us, right? It robs us of just peace and just our kids getting the best of us. So for Jason, like, what would you guys...
And not in a negative way. Because a lot of times, like, oh, they got the best of me. But no, they're getting the best of me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Great clarification there is like, we want them to get the best of us, and we're in our heads. and we're playing with them and we're thinking, I'm playing with them right now, but should I be teaching them life lessons right now? I got to treat her different than I treat him.
Yeah.
You know, I'd probably need to punch him. We're having a good time. He looks too happy. Maybe you should punch him, toughen him up. I mean, like, it's the constant, like, even that. How do you guys think if we got this right? If we got this right, if we started speaking truth to each other and we started, how do you think it would impact you as a dad?
I mean, I would give you a lot of confidence, I think, and which is what I think a lot of guys lack is we lack the confidence to believe in ourselves enough to make the decisions that we need to make to move forward. And a lot of times that confidence comes with being willing to take some risks in some certain areas. And I don't really know what that looks like with your children, but I think there's a lot of questions around, you know, being a dad and what you're supposed to do in specific timeframes. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was just reminded that even though I have two children, one's 12 and one's 7, my 7-year-old is the first time I've raised this specific 7-year-old. Right? Like they're both different. My kids are so different, and so the challenges I have with him aren't the challenges I had with my daughter. And so it's like, it feels like doing it all over again. Completely, like, who is this child that lives with me? Grew up in the same household, had the same rules, had the same structure around him, but as completely different and a rebel at times. Like, my daughter just loves following the rules, and he's like, I'll do what I want. It's like, you know, so it's like, who is this child? It's like, I think it allows me to just relax and just say, you know what? I think I can have the confidence to know or just trust that he's going to grow up and be a good member of society.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, that's good. PJ, what about you? What's the dream here?
I think there is something where when you feel secure in yourself, I think there's a very subtle way that it provides security to your kids and hopefully gives them permission to be themselves instead of trying to just kind of pretend that you're maybe something you're not. You just kind of embrace who you are, faults and all. And I think you sort of live and approach day to day with an ease that you know, relaxes them and makes them think, okay, Dad's okay with himself. I think I can be okay with myself.
That's a good point.
What would happen, you think, if you could put Chuck in his place?
I would feel more open and free to express myself and be myself, my own personality, but do that with my kids and be okay with it, you know? And like what you were saying, I really like what you're saying because it frees your kids up to be their own person and to feel like they have the freedom, because when you create that space for them, even in your own mind, you know, you kind of get out of your own way. With being a parent, I think it does free up that space almost so that everybody can have their own free space, their lane to be themselves, to be that different kid. Because my second child is way different than my first.
Right.
Same thing. But when I get out of my own way, when I trip Chuck out the door, it does free my own mind up to be able to parent two separate human beings in two different ways.
That's good. That's so good. And I thought after doing this exercise for a while that I had killed Fred, drop dead Fred. I thought I had killed him. I mean, and then we released the book, and he went immediately, "This doesn't even work for you, and now you've put it in print." Good job. Now you are talking about a fraud. Way to go. Way to bring false hope to the little tiny piece of the world that you're trying to bring it to. And so it was and I thought, and then I went back to the exercise and I wrote all this down. You guys, that day it was 27 things. And I went, okay, he may be with me forever. I've just got to figure out how to. So it's an ongoing process that I have to keep visiting, keep coming back to. So
let's say like the end of a horror movie too. You think he's dead, and then all of a sudden
he comes.
The post credits,
and he looks like a corpse.
Right.
Like
he really does. He really does. Okay. So on that note, Buck.
Yes.
On each episode, we want to give dads a pro move, a move that that's simple, but yet it's also powerful. It's going to matter.
Yeah.
And this is for dads living in the real world with a lot going on. So what is the pro move for this?
And I want to preface this with, I know we're speaking to dads, and a lot of you guys are like, I'm not going to do that. It's weird. But do it. Commit to doing it, and honestly, like, assess in a week. Like, how did your week go by doing this? So what we want to do, pro move, name your Fred. Mine was Chuck. Okay, we got Jerry the Jerk. What was yours again, B? Tyler.
I didn't name him again.
Tito.
No, I like Tito. Tito's a guy.
Tito's cool.
Tito's a guy I want to hang out with.
Tito's a guy we're going to hang out with. Yeah. Okay. So name your Fred, and by giving him a name, it separates it from you. Okay. So you can see it more clearly. For the entire Fred exercise, go to allprodad.com/podcast for the show notes.
I love that. You guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for being vulnerable with that. I know that's not easy to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening. We hope today encourages all of you to be an all-pro dad. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.